Welcome to Everything Counts, the podcast where we get real about money, risk, and how to protect what matters most. Now, Investec believes that wealth goes beyond rands and cents. It includes the safety and the well-being of our families. In today's episode of Everything Counts, we look at the digital world. Protecting our children online is also part of that responsibility. In this episode, we explore just how vulnerable young people are in the digital space, from gaming platforms and social media to targeted scams and inappropriate content. I'm your host, Mutel Khwaripe, and I'm joined by a team of experts today. Emma Sadler-Berkowitz, the founder of the Digital Law Company and Africa's leading authority on social media law and digital risk, as well as Ndibuo Mlauzi, who is a cybersecurity awareness training specialist at Investec, who's also been training students in the ProMat centers across the country on online behavior and cybersecurity. Welcome to you, Emma and Ndibuo. Ndibuo and Emma, it looks like these days screens are everywhere, and more of our children are using them at a far, far earlier age than perhaps I did. I mean, I only got my cell phone when I was in late teens, but children these days are getting to see screens and use the internet at a very, very early age. Should this be a concern for parents, especially when you look at things like screen time, Emma?
Yes, absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you so much to Investec for talking about this really important issue. I think awareness in this space is so critical. And I echo your concerns. I got my first phone when I was 16. It was a little green Nokia. I could phone people, but it was expensive. I could text people, but it had to be less than 160 characters. And I could play Snake, which I did aggressively. And now the game has changed totally. I was at a lunch party on Sunday, and there was a 5-year-old there who, for the duration of this party, was playing Roblox on his iPad at 5 years old. This is someone who can't yet read, can't yet write, but is on this platform being exposed to 40 million different user-generated games and all of the other obvious risks that go with that. So I think we've really got to start talking with each other about what age is appropriate. And remember that not all screen time is created equal.
Ndibuo, it's not only about being online for children, but it's also the games they also play, because a lot of children will tell you about the latest games coming out, a lot of gaming happening. What sort of monitoring should parents be doing in terms of gaming? Because we see it as a state of play, nothing harmful there. Should we worry?
I think in very much the same way that we want to monitor what our children are watching on TV, which thankfully we have the Film Publication Board for that. But when it comes to their cell phones, their tablets, these are devices they have on them, sometimes even when the parental realm of control or supervision is beyond them. So we very much want to be careful of what games they're playing, but important before we get to that point is building a relationship with each child so that you have a safe space for them to come and confide in you about things that they're encountering, communication that they're seeing or receiving while they're playing games. Because what we're also finding is a lot of predators are online under the guise of another child, and that's how they build relationships with these children, start building communication channels, and eventually start influencing their behavior, which then, if a parent is not paying attention to, becomes their vector for entering this child's family and life, and they start manipulating the children from that point. So it's absolutely critical to have some level of vision, some level of oversight when children are playing games online, but absolutely critical to that is the relationship with the child so they can confide in you.
So even with online, you need to sort of have the talk with them about there could be someone different behind the profile. There are some links that people could send to you that are not appropriate, things you need to look out for before you hand them the tablet, Emma.
So I think so much of this is just basic digital hygiene. We've been talking about stranger danger for a million years, but now that stranger danger where the predators used to be quite easy to spot in the real world now can look like a beautiful 12-year-old girl at the next door school. But it is a very real point. And I think that what has happened with the internet, with social media, with gaming chat rooms, with platforms like Discord, they've really been a present wrapped up in a big red shiny bow for sexual predators, for people who are interested in exploiting children. And I know it's a very hard ask to put the duty of trying to keep these children as safe as possible on the parents, because this world is a complicated, very fast-moving world. And how do we keep up with all of the technological advancements, and how on earth do these platforms work, and which games are they playing? And sometimes it can feel incredibly overwhelming. But I think that just taking power of that parental path again, remembering that we are the parent, that we can say no to children having handheld devices when they're very young, that we can monitor what they're watching, things like YouTube Kids, for example. I've got very young children. I've got a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and YouTube Kids is totally banned in our house. I know that my children will go to friends' houses and they will be watching YouTube Kids for hours, right? So as much as we can try and instill good digital hygiene at home, we've got to actually, exactly as India has been saying, have those conversations with the children so that when they do come, I'm afraid it's not if, but when they do come across inappropriate material, people who are making them nervous for whatever reason, that they are brave enough to come and talk to you. And it's one of the biggest issues that I have, particularly in the realm of extortion, which is the biggest crime, I think, affecting children in South Africa. It's the children are very slow to come forward for help because they feel ashamed. Everybody's told them don't send nudes to people that they meet online. They've done that. Sometimes now predators are using AI technologies to create deep fakes of children, extorting them, putting huge pressure on them, blackmailing them to comply, whether that's to send more content or to send money. And my absolute worst moment of the day, and this does happen to me daily because I get between 15 and 20 inquiries every single day from children who are being sextorted or from parents whose children are being sextorted. And the worst kind of DM I get from the kids is, I can't tell my parents. Please don't tell my parents. I need you to help me. But the worst case scenario is that my parents find out. And that truly is heartbreaking because in a time of crisis, that's when your children need you the most. So preparing yourself for that time of trauma, preparing yourself on how to react when your child comes to you to say that they are being pressured by somebody to send something, that they've seen something that's made them uncomfortable, that they can't sleep tonight because of some awful video that popped up on their YouTube, and making sure that you are a safe space for them, I think, is the most important message that we can give parents.
The games online are not just 1, 2, 3 and ABC, especially for young children. There are some guns there. There are some very inappropriate content on the games. How important is it for parents to check the parental advisory on some of the games just as much as they would if a movie was on screen?
One of the things we discussed with Emma was having common sense media. That's a very great resource that parents can use. It allows you to sort of gauge what kind of content are my children going to be interacting with on this game, on the site, in this movie. It's a very good sort of briefing strategy, I think, created by other parents who had the same concerns. And it's absolutely critical to chat to your children about this. So have a sort of positioning conversation to say, I'm not doing this to restrict you or deny you the joys of playing online or having these online gaming interactions, but it's really in the interest of protecting you as my child. You are my sole responsibility in this entire world with all the things that we have going on. I absolutely need to make sure that you are mentally well, you are physically well, and this forms part of the safety aspect of that.
100%. And to say to your children, I love you too much to put you in this dangerous situation, and I think one of the biggest issues we're seeing is that we are overprotecting our children in the real world and underprotecting them in the online world. And it's really trying to get parents to understand that when your children are online, when they are in a position where they're able to speak to strangers, that they're going to come across inappropriate material, it's sending them off down the street in the middle of the night with no adult with them. I'd far prefer the children were riding their bicycle to the corner shop, which in South Africa we're like, no ways, my child could never do that. Then that they're on one of these social media platforms. So I think that that's a very, very important point, is understanding the real risks of the online world. And platforms like Common Sense Media, which provide these sort of parents' ultimate guides to each of the social media platforms, the apps, the websites. One of my favorite things about them is that it gives age restrictions not just from the parents, but from children who've lived and breathed the space, which can be a much more authentic assessment of what age is appropriate. And just to give you an idea, when I speak at schools, and I speak to the older kids and I say, I believe social media and smartphones should be banned in primary schools, the high school kids clap at that moment because they've lived it. They understand that that's not a place for young children. When I said to the young children, they're like, oh, just another old person telling us what not to do, right? So it's really having the conversations and open conversations. Children love facts. They love science. So even with my little children now, I've started explaining to them about the science of the brain and how, and if you're playing games at that very young age or you're exposed to algorithmic content, for example, on YouTube Kids, that's already pre-programming those neural pathways for addiction, right? Yeah. And we look at brain pictures of people who are addicted to heroin and people who are addicted to gaming, and how the impact on the brain is identical. And so children love facts. So being very open with the children about why it is, instead of just saying, oh no, you're not allowed to be on it, explain why it is that you don't want them in those unsafe spaces.
Let's talk about the privacy conversation of being online, telling your kids about the POPIA Act and talking about you as a parent, where you want them to be and how to conduct themselves online, how they should respect other people's privacies as well. If an image is sent to you, doesn't mean you can send it forward. How do you just prepare them for that big world that they need to be responsible for?
Well, I think the most important is the modeling behavior. Right at the beginning, when your children are saying to you, Mommy, please don't put that on Instagram, and you ignore that, then you're undermining that child's own ability to dictate their privacy rights also in this digital world. Exactly. So I think it starts at home, and I always say with parents, when it comes to parenting, a few basic things: obviously no sharing of personal information. I don't share pictures of my children unless it's on a private account. There's no point in having a private account if you're going to let people you don't know follow you, especially now with the emergence of these AI technologies, where you can do so much with someone's image. I refer to this generally as image-based violence, but people creating deep fakes, turning your children into horrible bullying, memes, stickers. There's so many awful things we can do with an image now. So I think we've got to start thinking already when our children are young about who has access to those images. No naked pictures, no embarrassing content, no shaming content, understanding that that's a digital footprint that your child is going to inherit without having asked for it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, I think, is getting children to understand that the more you look after your privacy, the more of it you have. That if you have never been online in your life, you have a higher legal right to privacy than the person who's posting every 5 minutes. And we've just had a fabulous judgment from the Constitutional Court, which confirmed that if you are voluntarily putting information on the internet, you don't have an expectation of privacy over that content anymore. This idea that there's a blanket ban on sharing pictures of children is not what POPI says. There is a household exemption. There's a privacy, there's a processing exemption for domestic purposes. So I can take a picture of my child at her 6th birthday party with her little friends blowing out her candles. I don't need permission from those other parents to share that picture. But if I know that any of those parents have a rule that says my child is going to have a limited digital footprint or no digital footprint at all, then that parent is very well within their rights to say to me, I don't want that picture of my child. So there's a case from the Johannesburg High Court, which is pretty old now. It's called H versus W. And it confirms that if anybody uploads anything about you that you don't like, you can ask them to delete it. Unless it shows you doing something illegal, but that's not the case of children. Then you can ask them to delete it. And the law, it's not Emma's rule, although I'd make it my rule too, is that they must delete it. So you and I go out jawling tonight, we have a few tequilas, you post pictures of me tomorrow and I don't like them and I phone you and I say, bro, please take them down. The law is you must take them down. So it's really just this reminder of the more you look after your privacy, the more of it you have.
Well, you talk to a lot of young people about online behaviors and how they should conduct themselves. What are their concerns? What are they telling you about life online?
I think one of the big things that comes up is always cyberbullying and, of course, extortion. As Emma mentioned, it's one of the rising issues. The stats are incredible. But these are main things that they are dealing with. And mainly we speak to grade 10 pupils, but some of the time you'll have slightly younger pupils who sneak into the room. And in those conversations, some of the things they are raising are quite concerning. We've had to refer a couple of them to Childline to assist further. And the dangers are really around, I shared an image with a friend, it was supposed to be in jest, and unfortunately they've gone and created an anonymous Instagram account. I know it's them, but it's on there, and I can tell that it's me, and I'm not too sure what I can do. I've tried to report it, they're taking too long to take it down, that kind of situation. And the difficulty with the students that we speak to in particular are they may not have access to the resources that we do. So a lot of the time they have to suffer this in silence. It stays on their record. And when they start applying for university or job positions, that information comes up in their digital footprint, as Emma alluded to. And it then becomes a very difficult conversation. You're hoping for a good employer who'll have that conversation with you to say, how did this happen? But then you start going down, the whole journey and almost relearning reliving that trauma again. So that's one of the things that they're mentioning. Sometimes it's gotten to the point where sextortion has unfortunately resulted in suicides, because these children, as Emma mentioned, they're quite young. Your brain hasn't developed to the point where you can cope with some of this stress. And I was saying to her earlier, the beauty of the time that we grew up in was we would play outside. If somebody bullied you, you'd go back inside and it goes away. You maybe will have to deal with mom and dad assisting you or guiding you with how to handle that situation. You go back outside, you deal with the bully, and you move on. In this day and age, that information stays with you all the time. You try to go to sleep, it's on your phone. And you wake up in the morning, 100%. So it never leaves you alone. You're constantly trying to field it. You're also managing school and the pressures of your body changing. It's a lot to deal with. So these children are really struggling, but we always refer them to Childline just to start with the assistance process. And of course, the police is always a resort they can get to as well.
And parents could feel that this is a landmine, right? You're dealing with a teenager or a young South African who's online, and you're teaching them about how to conduct themselves. But as a parent, how do you manage that control of your child being online? And also, what are some of the things that you can use to minimize the risk, if you will, of their life online?
Absolutely critical. Cornerstone to this whole thing is your relationship with your child. In the main, we have to remember that as we're raising children, they are small adults in the making. So they start off with their personalities. You start seeing them quite young and early on. You have to start working with that personality, ideally not against it. So a lot of the time when children have to confide in a parent, they're going to choose the parent who allows them to speak a little bit more freely and can say what it is that they're encountering. So that accountability as a parent to say, I'm going to listen without judgment and genuinely work on not being judging in that moment. Some of the things they share with you will infuriate you. Some of them will make you very afraid to let them back online. But it's really about a trust journey between you and your child. Once you've got that in place, the tooling starts coming into play. So ideally, we would want to preface the tooling with that conversation so that they understand you're not trying to withhold good things from them. You're just trying to ensure that they have a good experience with those things, especially since the control is so limited. But once you've had the conversation, you can then start looking at third-party tools. A lot of these will allow you to monitor what's happening on your child's devices.
These are apps that are online that can help protect your child.
Absolutely, yes. There are a couple. So a lot of the tooling that's available allows you to get notifications if your children are receiving inappropriate content or sending inappropriate content. It also notifies you if they're having suicidal ideation, which a lot of the time children are very good at developing sort of code language for things that they're feeling. You have all sorts of slang and things flying around. And as parents, it's very difficult to try and keep up with all of that amid everything else you have to stay on top of. So it's very good at picking up those things. There are chat rooms and forums that parents form part of that feed into this information database. So it alerts you when these things are coming up so that you can then have a conversation with your child. A lot of the time you'll start noticing a change in behavior. Bubbly children all of a sudden becoming very quiet, very withdrawn, recluse, refusing to hand over their cell phone or at least engage with you around their behavior on that. Another thing that they do is if you're finding that your children are finding ways to hide certain apps, they can pick up on those as well. So you maybe might want to consider how much time your child is spending on a particular application. And this is where you'll tend to see that the name that they've given it isn't quite what the application does. One of the easiest examples of this is a calculator icon, which genuinely is a disguise for a different kind of application, which normally sits as the entrance to a chat room. So a lot of things like those that as parents we can use just to find out what's going on with our kids a little bit.
I think you've empowered the parents now, enlightened a lot of them. Emma, looking at some of those tools, I mean, what do they do? What are the tools that parents can use immediately to try and start managing that process online?
Yeah, so there are device level tools. So for example, with the Apple devices, we get screen time. With the Android devices, there's Google Family Link. Those are fine. You can do basic things with them. Set time limits, make sure your children aren't downloading apps unless you've approved them. And to your point, India, it's very important that you're aware of these vault apps. So sometimes they're sort of a back end onto the internet, but sometimes it's just an area on the phone which is disguised by something something like a calculator where you can keep all the apps and photos and videos which you're not supposed to have, right? So exactly to your point, if you check on a Sunday, you know how we get the sort of time report.
Yes.
And if you go on and you see that your child has spent, I don't know, 8 hours on a fitness app in the middle of the night, then it's very likely they found a back end onto the internet using that app. So that's one of my favorite tricks. Or, you know, if they're using the calculator for 4 hours on a Sunday evening, then maybe that's a bit of a sign. So I think that those free apps are a very good place to start. You know, I think that certainly any kind of control is better than no control. I do think that the third-party apps are probably the best investment in terms of monitoring. So there's a whole lot of them. There's Bark, Our Pact, Custodio. I'm a big fan of Bark. And the difference between those paid apps and the free ones is exactly the alert function. We've picked up that there's some self-harm content or eating disorder content or suicidal ideation or that your child's being groomed or bullied. And you get a sort of an alert, a red alert on your phone, which then allows you to go and check the phone to see if there is something that should be concerning you. So I would say certainly when your child is younger, when they get their first phone, when they start their social media journey, having a third-party paid-for app is ideal. And they do cost about 200 Rand a month. So that's not available for everybody, in which case the free apps are a very good place to start. And I certainly don't think it's forever. You know, I think when your child is young and they're starting their journey, it's a good idea. And then if you've noticed any significant change in your child, I don't know, you walk in and your 16-year-old quickly hides their phone, or they're not eating, or they've lost a huge amount of weight, or they're not sleeping, or you're worried about self-harm, or there's something going on and you can't figure it out, and your parental instinct is then have a look at one of those paid for apps, because they're just an extra level of protection, which I think are a very good thing. But we also got to be we've also got to be careful that we don't rely on them too heavily, because remember, those might be on the actual device the kid is using at home, but it might not be on the device that they're using at school or when they're at granny's house or at their friend's house. So there is no substitute for open, honest conversations. We know time and time again, the first line of defense and the best line of defense is active, involved, engaged, aware parents. And I know that's an easy thing to say. It takes time, it takes effort, but I promise you it's worth it.
Ndibuo, as we wrap up this conversation, just some nuggets for the parents and maybe even the young people you get to chat to around behavior online and what they should be doing to firstly protect themselves as the users, but what parents should be looking out for.
Absolutely. In the main, you want to have your kids managing passwords to their devices, access to that, and their online profiles as well. Too many times we've had instances where children say, I got hacked, somebody was able to guess my password, they've started posting this, content, which is very off-brand for me. But unfortunately, because it's sensational and children are at that age where things catch their attention very quickly, it starts to spread and become viral. And that causes a lot of trauma and challenge even beyond that getting taken down. So in the main, make sure that you're managing your online presence. Try and keep it minimal, like Emma alluded to. The more of your privacy that you protect, the more of it you have. I love that, actually. So you want to make sure that they're, if they are engaging online, that's in a controlled environment. They understand the risks, and they can only do this if they've had the conversation with an adult.
I was just going to say the password sharing is a very big thing I'm picking up, particularly with the tweens. There's this, oh, well, my best friend's got to have my password, otherwise how does she know she can trust me? Or my friend's got to have my password so she can keep up my streaks while I'm away or while my phone's been confiscated. So streaks is this thing that's very popular with the kids on Snapchat, which is that you have to message each other every day and then you get a streak. And if you lose it, so it's just a gamified way of making sure the children are completely addicted to these devices. And then often, because these children use passwords across the platforms, they give that password to keep up the streaks, and then they have a fight, and then that password is used to log into an account and terrible things are posted. So password protection is absolutely critical, and making sure that your children understand how important it is to have two-factor authentication, even from a very young age. The second they're not sure if they're speaking to somebody, that if the person is who they think they are, to video call them. I'd love to say to the children, never meet anyone online ever, but that's not the world we live in. That if you're just not quite sure your spidey senses are saying, is this person who they say they are, video call them. And if they don't answer, or they tell you their front camera is broken, that's a very popular one at the moment, then it's very likely the dodgy dude in the red free candy van. So really, it's instilling all of those good digital hygiene habits that we've spoken about on various podcasts like this before, that apply to adults, should apply to children as well.
Absolutely.
Emma and Ndibuo, when we talk about monitoring kids online, all these apps are great. All of that is absolutely amazing. But as parents, you still have to be the one paying attention to your child and their behaviors. What should we be looking out for in terms of the signs and cues that tell us something's happening?
Yeah. So I think any significant change in your child's mood, any significant change in school marks, sleep, enthusiasm for life. You know, so often when these kids start getting particularly involved in the gaming world, they don't want to play sport anymore or go to dance class or swimming lessons or go and hang out with their friend because the real world just becomes grayscale. They want to be in their online space. So I think it's really, and the other thing is, even from when kids are very little, when you turn off the show and there's a monumental breakdown, like taking drugs away from a drug addict, that's a pretty big sign to say, oh, well, maybe we should just recalibrate a little bit. Maybe we need a few screen-free days. Maybe we need to have a little digital detox, get back to a base level of behavior to work out what impact this is having. And, as much as we'd love to give a line by line, these are the rules on Roblox and these are the rules on Minecraft and these are the real rules on Snapchat, we can't do that. We can give general principles, right? So whenever you feel, and parents always know best, whenever you feel that a game or an app is having a significant negative impact on the child, even if it's you've got no firm evidence to prove that it's the case, listen to that instinct. And as I say, it's never too late to do a product recall. You can be like when you've released a car and then you've realized that, okay, there's a safety issue. Let's call the car back. You can be the parent. In that moment, you can say, okay, well, Fortnite is having this very negative impact on my child's behavior. They are becoming aggressive. They don't want to sleep. They don't want to eat. They don't want to socialize. Let's take it away for a little bit and see if that might be the cause.
Absolutely. And I think one of the other things that you'll tend to notice with the younger children, as adults, we generally can emote a little bit better. We can communicate how we're feeling. Yeah. With children, you'll tend to see it as a change in behavior. They might get a little bit angrier, a little bit short. Sometimes they can't communicate sadness immediately, especially because of some of the tropes that are passed around at school. So the angry jock generally starting to become very soft would not be a good look. But generally, if they're at home and they start having a change in behavior, that's a very big red flag that parents should not miss out on. And it's always a great place to start a conversation with them. Sometimes they'll be a little bit resistant to this, but the softer of the parents can always pitch in, or if it's an aunt or uncle or grandmother or cousin, someone can always pitch in to have this conversation. Say, look, I've noticed you've been a little bit short lately. Is everything okay? If something is wrong, let's go for a drive. Let's go for a walk. Let's go for a run, and engage them physically so that you're doing a fun activity that still allows them to delve into the difficult stuff that they might not always know how to broach with you.
Dubu and Emma, thank you for that fascinating conversation. There's a lot to think about, from knowing which apps to monitor to having regular conversations with your kids. Digital safety starts at home. In the second part of this conversation, we'll cover cyberbullying and peer-to-peer harm. Thank you to our guests again, Ndubu and Emma. And remember, when it comes to protecting your family, everything counts.
The views expressed are those of the contributors at the time of publication and do not necessarily represent the views of the firm and should not be taken as advice or recommendations. Investec Private Banking, a division of Investec Bank Limited, a registered credit provider committed to the Code of Banking Practice as regulated by the Ombudsman for Banking Services.